Well, it's January the 20th, 2021. It's the end of the Trump presidency, and Biden will be sworn in a few hours' time. What is the Trump legacy going to be? Well, of course, wall-to-wall media want it to be the storming of the Capitol by Trump supporters and those who claimed to be Trump's supporters. But I have to say, as I get interviewed by people on Trump's 4 years, I'm being asked again and again, do I regret backing Donald J. Trump? Well, my journey with him started back in Mississippi in August 2016 when he invited me up onto the stage in the wake of Brexit.
This is a great honor for me. I am going right now to invite onto the stage the man behind Brexit. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nigel Farage.
I come to you from the United Kingdom with a message of hope and a message of optimism. It's a message that says, if the little people, if the real people, if the ordinary decent people are prepared to stand up and fight for what they believe in, we can overcome the big banks. We can overcome the multinationals.
And I have to say, it was an extraordinary experience. I was slightly nervous. 18,000 Mississippians didn't quite know how the Brexit message would go down, but it worked. And it was all part of that great populist revolt. We, of course, have been very lucky because Brexit is now done. Oh, I know the deal's not perfect, but Brexit has actually been done. In America, well, Trump leaves the White House right now. And I have to say, I've got no regrets about backing him in 2016 at all. Indeed, I was back in 2020 in the campaign. And once again, I spoke on a platform at a Trump rally in Arizona.
A friend of mine, a lot of people say one of the most powerful men in Europe, Nigel Farage.
4 years ago, I was honored to come to America to bring the Brexit message, the message that you can beat the establishment. And that is what Donald Trump did.
Of course, the events of the 6th of January were very bad news, terrible images, and I think it was unwise to have a rally on that day in the Capitol. But let's be clear about one thing. Why did Trump lose this election? I was with him on the 29th of February last year, backstage at CPAC. Unemployment was at 50-year lows. Growth was strong and steady. And for all the world, I thought he was going to win a complete and utter landslide, and many others did too. COVID came along. Of course, difficult for any leader during a COVID crisis, but it's not actually COVID, and it's not the economic impact of COVID that cost Trump the election. It's what the Americans did with their voting system. You see, for the Democrats, their big challenge in the big cities is to get people to actually go out and vote on the day. And normally, turnouts in those big Democrat cities are very low indeed. But this time, because of COVID, they took the election to the people. Over 100 million people voted with early mail-out postal ballots. And it was because of that that turnouts were massively increased in the big cities. I'm not going to talk about fraud. I'm just going to talk about turnout. I've no doubt there was ballot harvesting going on an industrial scale, which in many American states wasn't against the law. But they were able to knock on doors and collect ballots. And that is why Joe Biden won, plain and simple. So you could argue that Trump was a bit unlucky, but as Macmillan said years ago, events, dear boy, events. So what is the Trump legacy? Well, for me, and this is the most important thing, think about why the populist wave happened. Think about why in Britain, America, Europe, other parts of the world, why did we see the growth of new politics over the course of the last 10 years? It's actually very simple. It's because we've had the emergence of career politicians, people who go straight from college into politics. They care far more about their own careers than we do about principles. They get together in the big capital cities with a mainstream media who are made up of the same people, lobbyists made up of the same people, global businesses made up of the same people. And when it comes to issues that affect everyday life, frankly, they may as well be on a completely different planet. And at election time, they stand up and make a series of promises to the electorate that they never actually intend to deliver. So there was a breakdown of trust, a fundamental breakdown of trust between the electors and the elected, and that is why the populist movements came along. Trump's perhaps biggest and best legacy is that he made a series of promises to the American people and did his absolute damnedest to keep them. In fact, one of his wisecracks was, I've kept more promises than I even made. I think in many ways that is probably true. He did his absolute best to hold faith with what he promised to do. And you know, in return, tens of millions of Americans adore him, love him for doing precisely that. Unlike all the previous administrations, this has not been another endless series of foreign wars, wars, of course, that we always seem to get dragged into. In fact, what he's managed to do is to broker a series of remarkable peace agreements across the Middle East, and that will be, I think, a terrific, lasting legacy. He even went to North Korea to meet Little Rocket Man, if you remember, and crossed the line into North Korea. So he's tried to be a peacemaking president. In economic terms, he's done more for small and medium-sized businesses than any president since Reagan, and the Americans have pursued a policy of genuine deregulation and cutting of red tape. And I think holding trust with voters, overseeing a phenomenal economy, helping the small people against the big people, brokering peace deals across the world, I think that is a terrific legacy, however badly some may have behaved on the 6th of January. So don't buy in to the media telling you that it's been 4 dreadful, disastrous, awful years. It's been far from that for many, many Americans. And arguably, he's done some other good things across the world. Do you know, NATO members are now beginning to pay a bit more to be part of the club. So he's used his influence in that way too. The outgoing administration have branded the Chinese Communist Party as genocidal in their treatment of the Uyghurs. And I hope and pray that the pressure is kept on. Pressure kept on Biden and pressure kept on Boris Johnson, who's declared himself to be a Chinese-loving Sinophile, and of course who wanted Huawei to be in our 5G mobile network. So we've got to keep the pressure on with those things. A Biden administration, well, I think probably what you'll see are a series of appointments that are made on the grounds of diversity more than the grounds of ability. He, of course, will be a virtue-signaling president. I doubt he'll achieve very much. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. So what does Trump do now? Well, there is one last act, I'm afraid, of this Trump presidency, and it's this. The Senate, within the next couple of weeks, will debate and vote on the second impeachment hearing. And it's becoming clear when Mitch McConnell, who's the leader of the Senate Republicans, says the Republicans must vote with their conscience, it's becoming clear that there are Republicans who are going to vote to impeach President Trump. What that will mean is that he's not allowed to run for public office again under the US Constitution. And I see a parallel here with Margaret Thatcher back in 1990, the most successful leader of the Conservative Party in modern times, perhaps ever, having won 3 general elections and still having support in the country, but it was her colleagues in Westminster that ousted her. It was catastrophic for the Conservative Party. It took them over 20 years to regain their confidence. So if Mitch McConnell and others think that by impeaching Trump, by barring him from running again, that the Republican Party's problems are over, I think they'd be making a huge, historic mistake. But I begin to fear that what happened to Thatcher will happen to Trump. Whether it does, whether it doesn't, it's been 4 years of having somebody prepared to stand up, say what they think, try to fulfill their promises to the electorate. And far from apologizing for supporting Trump, I'm very proud to have done so all the way through.